these beautiful passageways have been dissolved by water, slightly acidic water.
Welcome to Blue Mountains in New South Wales, Australia. Currently behind me is the iconic Three Sisters. We are currently in the Blue Mountains to explore the kind of offerings that they have here. We'll start off with our tour at the Jenolan Caves, the 300 million year old cave that is filled with limestone artifacts. Join me on this journey. In our travels to Australia, we went to the Blue Mountains, very close by near Sydney, Australia, New South Wales. There we went to this area called the Jenolan Caves. Jenolan Caves are limestone caves located within the Jenolan Karst Conservation Reserve, and it is located towards the west of Blue Mountains in New South Wales. The caves are the most visited of similar groups of limestone caves in Australia, and the most ancient discoveries were also being made very recently. I speak with the Jenolan Caves conservationist there to understand better the whole idea of the caves. There are no known contemporary accounts of the discovery of the caves by Europeans, but through Charles Wallen it is attributed as the first European to conduct visitors to the caves, and that was in 1840s. The caves, originally known as the Fish River Caves, came under the control of the New South Wales government in 1866, becoming only the second area in the world reserved for the purpose of conservation.
The beautiful gardens. This was as good as the botanical garden. The creek was running here, now put underground through pipes. Okay. But we're in here. This is where we're dining.
The caves were open to tourism early, but there were little protection from visitors on damaging formations until the collection of souvenirs and the writing of graffiti that was eventually banned in 1872. The name Jenolan Caves was finally adopted in 1884 and still used today.
So you actually, this is the...
Man-made tunnel.
Yeah, just mentioning we're about to go into the Binamere Cut, a man-made tunnel, 1954. This shortcut saved visitors walking, well, the entire distance through the mountain. At one stage they had to catch a boat across the river, underground river. This tunnel, about 130 metres long, saved all that journey, saved all that work. You were doing about 1,300 stairs each way to get into the cave and out. That is not the cave, remember that. Don't waste too much time in there. I'll turn some lights on. Okay, so we're now walking through our 130 metre shortcut tunnel. This tunnel, just over 60 years old, was hand cut through the mountain. The amazing thing is the surveying to link up the tunnel and the cave. That surveying was done way back in 1926. Hi folks, my name is Stuart and here we are at Jenolan Caves, New South Wales, Australia. We acknowledge the Gundungurra and Wiradjuri people had known about this area for thousands of years. Europeans arriving in the valley 1838. We are now standing in the Lucas Cave, which was being explored in 1960. We're now entering the Lucas Cave and our first glimpse of the glorious underground water section. The chamber you're approaching, the size of a football field. Approximately 2.5 hours drive from Sydney, we are in the magnificent Jenolan Caves. Overnight stays, but just a day trip if you're stuck for time. Here at Jenolan, the big claim to fame is you will be exploring the oldest caves on the planet. The caves you're standing in here, 340 million years old. They don't come any older. This magnificent 10-kilometre piece of limestone pushed up by the action of the tectonic plates. Hundreds and hundreds of caves here to explore. We are in the show cave, the Lucas Cave today. We will later be going to the Orient Cave and the River Cave to see our magnificent sections of underground water. If you're crazy enough to don the scuba diving gear, divers have been down to nearly 100 metres beneath the surface. 15-degree temperature inside the caves all year. Absolutely perfect. Not too hot, not too cold. "365 days of the year, Jenolan Caves is open to the public. There is a small charge to explore our different caves. If you're brave enough, you can even do the adventure caving. Or sit at the bistro, have a beer at the bar, enjoy the beautiful natural environment. In days gone by, people from Sydney would flock here to Jenolan Caves. So that they could actually get to where they put the lights in. There is absolutely no way cave development now would allow you to put those steel pegs in. Now, here and there you can see where they've been cut off. Sometimes they'll use an oxyacetylene, a hot torch. Well, that's going to put smoke in here, that's going to do damage. Sometimes they'll get out the angle grinder. Well, that's going to do damage too. You're going to have the filings put through the caves. Sometimes it's better just to say, oh look, this is historic infrastructure, let's leave it. Okay. But to think that the concrete that you're walking on here, there were steel rails, there were electric lighting in this cave. All these materials were actually carried all the way through the mountain, all carried on guides' backs. There's no way you can get a vehicle in here. Labour of love, the work that was done. The first motor car arrived here in 1904. It's a lot easier to get here now, only a 2.5 hour drive from Sydney. If you're lucky, you may even see a little bit of snow on the way. It does get cold in winter, so bring those winter woolies. Our temperature range will probably be around 0 to a maximum of 40 degrees. These caves, the rock limestone is made from layer upon layer upon layer of seashells and corals. This was an ancient sea 430 million years ago. No internet, no trees, no flowering plants, no fish, no animals with backbones. People have different beliefs, but if we've got the scientific perspective, the limestone here, these beautiful passageways dissolved by underground rivers. As the mountains got smaller, the valleys became deeper, and the water that once flowed through here, it's way back down below us. You were at the Blue Lake earlier this morning. Yep. That's the water table. We've got 10 kilometres of limestone pushed up and out of the ocean to form our mountain range, part of the Great Dividing Range. You're standing here at about 900 metres above sea level. The thought was there was probably about 8 kilometres of mountains on top of us. You're talking the size of Everest. Wow. But long story short, Limestone of the cave, silt. Silt, any underground river, any river has silt and mud in it. These silts have been dated. Potassium argon dating tells the scientists that these silts have been here for 340 million years. If the silt's been here for 340 million years, there had to be an opening for that mud to be washed into. If they've got the sums right, you are standing in the oldest cave on planet Earth, the Orient Cave. Temple of Baal next door, very similar age, but you are right up on top of the mountain here. Many years ago, the mountain's taller, there would have been caves on top of us. If those caves were still here, they would have been older. Amazingly, one day people will look up and see blue sky. The caves that are now below us full of water, people will be walking through them. Just don't buy your tickets for that cave yet. You're talking about millions of years. Yeah. So 340 million year old passageways you're walking through here today. 430 million year old limestone. Always makes me feel kind of young. Welcome to the Persian Chamber. We're on our tour through the wonders of the Orient Express. A little bit later on, we're going to be heading off to Egypt, India. These were the great empires. This beautiful chamber here, they believe, formed by rising warmed waters, heated waters, forming this beautiful cupola. 340 million years of history. The interior decorators have had a long time to do the decorations. As we look around this chamber, we have here a beautiful chandelier. We have the largest stalagmite here at Jenolan. Drip, drip, drip. Rainwater makes its way through tiny fissures in the rock, tiny cracks. Rainwater dissolves limestone. Every little drip of water that comes into the cave has that little drop of limestone dissolved in it. The water simply evaporates away and leaves behind the pure calcite. Stalagmites, they might reach the roof. Stalactites, the ones that are holding on tight. Eventually, if a stalactite and a stalagmite join together, they will form a column. We've been assured by management that none will fall off today. Things happen over years. 1973, south of Sydney, Picton, there was an earthquake early in the morning. Quite a decent earthquake. They went and visited the river cave that morning and found one smashed on the floor of the cave, a stalactite that had held on tight for possibly thousands, possibly millions of years, smashed on the floor of the cave. Fear not, that's the last one to fall off.
You were saying that millions of years it was warmed up by warm water.
Heated waters making their way up into these beautiful cupolas.
What would heat it? Is it like volcano?
Thermal activity. The world was simply a warmer place, so you had more thermal activity. Huge mountains on top of us here, we would have been a little bit closer to the Earth's mantle, the hot stuff, if you like.
Yeah.
If you're planning on a hot spa today, you're about 350 million years too late. So no hot spa for you today. This beautiful section here is known as the petrified forest, resembling pine trees in a forest. The largest stalagmite here at Jenolan, the Pillar of Hercules. Many years by candlelight, the soot from those candles would have completely destroyed the decorations. Soot, it would have been a nightmare for the for the housekeepers of the time, simply cleaning the soot from the benches at home, cleaning the soot from the windowsills, the damage that could have been done to these caves if electric lighting hadn't been introduced. So amazingly, the first caves in the world to see an electric light globe. But to think that people would spend 3 days coming here just to see an electric light globe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We've got some fantastic little stalactites and stalagmites on this wall of the cave. Early guests would travel across this body of water by boat. 1923, the boat had to go and the walkway we're now walking on was installed. 1950s, Australia's first cave dive ever, here at Jenolan Caves. If you're crazy enough to don the air tanks, put on your wetsuit, there are many more passageways to be explored. This particular passageway disappears for 400 metres to a depth of 30 metres. So 400 metres of passageway, a depth of 30 metres. The water temperature is 14 degrees. It's something like my worst nightmare to wake up and find yourself underwater, let alone 400 metres into a narrow passageway. You can't turn around. Often they take their scuba diving tanks off to make it through a squeezy section. But in exactly the same way that the water dissolves the limestone, it then redeposits that limestone or limescale, if you like, calcite crystal. Now the old joke here is do not put the water from the underground rivers here in your motor car's radiator or even your windscreen washers. It will block it up. It's hard water. It's got that dissolved limestone in it.
We hear this all the time.
So some places in the world, they put down a bore, they find beautiful, crystal clear, pure water with a nice pH balance. Other times you've got the minerals. This is simply not the limestone minerals that have been deposited over the thousands, over the millions of years. Calcite. So not salt.
Yeah.
It was the sea 430 million years ago. There were no trees on our planet, no flowering plants, no vertebrates, no animals with backbones, no fish, very little oxygen. This is early life you're looking at, simply been deposited. Now, limestone is an incredibly common rock throughout the world. The Himalayas, limestone. So much of our world was warm, shallow seas. Seashells and corals, living and dying, squashed, crushed. When you drove through the big grand arch, what was once this way up, tipped over on its side. To think that, scientists believe there might have been 8 kilometres of mountains on top of us. We don't know how deep it goes. We've got this 10-kilometre slice. But in this area, there are many other sections of limestone, caves all over the place. It's got to get pushed up and out of the sea, tiny little cracks, eventually fill with water. The water dissolves away these beautiful passageways. Remember, mountains get smaller, valleys get deeper, water level drops. And one day the mountain won't be here. I think the caves will outlast us.
Yeah.
Time. Many years ago, management wanted an emblem for Jenolan. They wanted the most beautiful feature they possibly could. On my jacket, the Indian canopy, the emblem of Jenolan, the real thing, the Indian canopy. A headdress for an Indian elephant. A big parade is planned. This section here is known as the mud tunnels. It's quite a labyrinth, passageways leading left, right and centre. But we'll be making our way through to the underground river section now. The magnificent chamber we're in is known as the exhibition chamber, about the size of a football field. Down below us, a great view of the underground river system. 14-degree water for those that would like to take a swim. The water you see here, exactly the same as the water in the blue lake at the front of the caves. There'd probably be about 80 metres of rock on top of us at this stage. This water is 800 metres above sea level. We're high in the Great Dividing Range. Here we are, back to the outside world, and it's another beautiful day here at Jenolan Caves.
When you're traveling to the mountains, you are expected to travel upwards. In terms of elevation, you are expected to go up. But the Blue Mountains, and therefore the Jenolan Caves, brings about an interesting, unique experience because you kind of start off on a high elevation itself. So you drive from the city and you drive upwards towards the Blue Mountains, and you kind of feel that you're on a higher elevation. But within the Blue Mountains, it's quite inherent that you're driving downwards towards the Jenolan Cave. And in fact, you go really, really deep down, miles even underneath the ground floor. And that's the kind of experience that is going to be felt quite significantly if you travel to this area. So after exiting the caves, you kind of take a feel into the valley that you're in. You're surrounded by lush green mountains, and when I went there it was winter, so you can actually feel the cool breeze of the air. But you have to acknowledge the fact that it's kind of interesting to be located deep down in a valley high up in the mountains. Being in the pool inside the Jenolan Caves is an humbling experience as you realize how insignificant you are in the grand scheme of things of how nature works. It's also important to note that the national parks have actually put a lot of effort in conserving the place and ensuring that they can maximize the important experiences that one can feel while going through the tight passages of the Jenolan Caves, including that of the pool. They play around not with anything much, but with light. It's also interesting that with light brings about all the important experiences that one can get while visiting this place. This concludes not just the trip to the Jenolan Caves, but also towards our trip in Australia. We realized that Australia is such a big country, it's its own continent. And because there's so much to explore, we've only taken a slither of experience here by visiting the caves and also the mountains within Australia. But of course, there's so much more to explore. From this trip, I've learned so much, including that of how conservation work is done, and why it's important for us to share our experience with everyone around us to ensure that the imprint we leave behind for future generations is a positive one.